Welcome, everybody, to the first ever JMO Podcast. I'm your producer, Tayler Michels, and on this kickoff episode of the podcast, we have host Jason Mitchell and I talking about how excited we are to launch this podcast, all the great behind-the-scenes fishing industry content that you can expect to hear down the road on this podcast, and even towards the end, I get Jason to share a few fun stories about how he came into the industry, some great stories that he's never told on any other platform. You're not going to want to miss it.
The JMO Podcast is sponsored by Long Haul Trucking. Long Haul Trucking is looking for skilled professional CDL drivers to join their team. Long Haul values their drivers and shippers like nobody else. Their employee-owned ESOP structure has them leading the industry in pay and benefits, geared towards long-term success and growth for company drivers and owner-operators. Long Haul is a people-first company, and it shows. They take pride in giving their drivers an opportunity to have a fulfilling career along with a healthy, happy life on the home front. If you're a professional CDL driver, get a hold of Long Haul at 1-800-255-5153 or look them up online at longhaultrucking.com. Long Haul, running on the power of promises kept.
Why don't you bring it in, man?
Well,
talk about it.
We've had this idea for a podcast for a long time. And, obviously we get, who knows how many hours, we're sitting in a vehicle together, driving to the next fishing destination. So we've been scheming and dreaming about this podcast. And ultimately this podcast isn't going to be about me. It's going to be about just so many different, interesting people we meet in this industry, and that was kind of one of the things that spurred us on this concept is that, we come across so many great people, and there's just so many neat stories to be told that, we just don't get a chance to put everything on our television show. And so what we envision with this podcast is going to be kind of a behind-the-scenes look at the industry. And so, already we've got great interviews from, people like Corey Springle, John Hoyer, Chase Parsons, and basically, and we've got a lot more scheduled, but, we meet so many, interesting people, and podcast is kind of the perfect format to tell a lot of those stories and to kind of get to the nitty-gritty of what makes this industry tick and what makes some of these people tick. And the other thing it allows us to do is, it allows us to maybe touch on some of the more controversial subjects, or maybe some of the, hot button things that, you probably stay away from television with, but on a podcast, you can let it buck. And so this is really going to be kind of an unfiltered version of what's happening in the fishing industry right now.
Without going into them, because we might not have time on this podcast, what are some of those things you're thinking of right off the bat? We talk about stuff all the time. You look at things going on in Canadian provinces or just right here in the Midwest where we travel, and even outside. There's a lot of, it's a good time to be in fishing now, don't you think?
Well, we've got some phenomenal fishing, and some of it's just awareness, regulations, and some ecosystems, the fish are protected, whether it's restrictive size limits. Yeah, people are just more conservation minded today, but, one thing, that we're, obviously, there's all kinds of different topics, but, just even safe catch and release practices, how to handle fish, and even some of the controversial stuff where, I think, we're always learning, we're always evolving. And so you look at fisheries management and, at the same time, I'm wondering how long it'll take, some of the states to implement, barbless hooks. You look at Mille Lacs, is a tremendous walleye fishery, but there's such, conservative limits over there. And you have to ask yourself sometimes, if you're going out there to catch 30 to 50 fish a day and you can't keep any of them, you still killed 3 to 5 fish in some cases, if you're reeling them up on a live bait rig out of 24 feet of water. And so, there's, and then the other thing is I think sometimes these fish get caught a lot where I think that affects some of their body condition. And so when you have a, college graduate measuring fish and taking body condition, is a fish in tough shape because it's been handled and caught several times, or is it a lack of forage? And then how do you skew that data? And so I think there's a lot of things going on right now with fishing that, I think people have to take just a hard, no BS look at and then see if there's room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely some non-BS individuals out there that, we are hopefully going to have a chance to come in contact with and have them on this podcast and have some really great interviews, hopefully.
Oh yeah, we're going to bring in the radicals and the the people that aren't afraid to speak their opinion, and that's the beauty of it, is you don't have to agree with them, but the best thing that can happen is you hear different opinions that at least have some thought behind it, some experience behind it, and you can either agree or disagree, but usually if an opinion is very well formed, you can't go wrong with hearing it regardless.
A lot of these conversations are being had, and they're really good conversations, but a podcast like this might be able to get something out there where we can really educate people, hopefully.
Absolutely. There's a lot of behind the scenes conversations that are had that don't ever make television. There's just no good way to get some of those messages, or at least some of those concepts out there, except for a podcast is perfect, and so yeah, we're pretty excited about this, and again, there's just going to be so many different people that we can tap into, the network of people that we have, the sky's the limit really, as far as just the different voices that we can bring into this.
Yeah, absolutely. And to start out, we're not going to nail ourselves down to a particular studio or anything, but probably take this thing on the road.
Yep.
And, I just look forward to some of those opportunities in the future. You'll be able to find us on YouTube.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll have all of our podcasts uploaded onto YouTube, and we're going to take this equipment on the road where if we're at a sports show, we're filming with different people throughout the year, but we run into all kinds of interesting people. This is going to be a perfect platform. If you're driving on the road, if you just have some windshield time, we're going to have all kinds of, if you love to fish, we're going to have all kinds of, crazy topics, crazy people. It's going to be fun.
As much time as we spend together for us to have these fun conversations, and, definitely be some entertainment value there as well, I assure people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe, we could kick it off here with this first one. Maybe talk a little bit about some of your, coming into TV. Now, this podcast is a new platform. This isn't your first time starting out on a new platform, though. You kind of talk about when you came into TV and what that was like, and the way things are now, things that we might hear on the podcast.
Yeah, we've been doing television now. We've been doing Jason Mitchell Outdoors now for over 10 years. And I guided on Devil's Lake for, almost over 10 years, before that. And so I was guiding every day, and I was just a fishing bum. I mean, when I was young, I just wanted to fish every day, and I had a camper actually down by Woodland Resort that I slept in, and I remember having like 150 feet of extension cord going out to it, and I would come into the bathroom at the meat shop and brush my teeth in the morning, and use a shower house, up in the campground, and I was just a fishing bum. I mean, I just fished every day, and just having the time of my life, and so that was kind of my niche, I guess. I really felt at home. I didn't really ever want to be, I didn't really care about attention. I didn't ever, care about, wrapping a boat, or, I just wanted to fish, and guiding enabled me to do that, and so I got to fish a lot, and years after years, and the years go by, and I started, we started doing a lot of different television shows with other people, and we filmed with Midwest Outdoors, we filmed with In Fisherman, basically, every major fishing show in the upper Midwest, at some point we filmed with, we were doing, we were in a lot of the magazines and stuff, so we started kind of getting known in the industry, just for Devil's Lake and ice fishing and those things. And then one person in particular that I did a lot of filming with was Tony Dean, and Tony Dean was out of Pierce, South Dakota, and he was in his early 70s at the time, and or actually, I think he was in his early 60s, and he decided he wanted to retire, and so then I had the opportunity to take a show over and buy the show from him. And looking back, I mean, I didn't know nothing about nothing, and then we were going to co-host it together for a few years, and then he died unexpectedly from a appendicitis attack that went bad, and so we kind of had to go without him, and that's why I always have the in memory of Tony Dean at the back of the show, is that just to kind of give a little bit of tribute to him. He was the one that helped me get started, and so and Tony tried to instill in me as many things as possible. And I remember him giving me advice that didn't make sense until many years later. But at the same time, the industry's changed a lot too. When Tony was in the industry, broadcast was big, broadcast television. The cable networks hadn't really arrived yet at that point. And online video streaming, didn't really exist. And so the industry's changed so much since, in the last 10 years since Tony's been gone. But, ultimately, we try to put our own stamp on it. Some of the things that worked for Tony, because Tony's he was on the air for 25 years. And so some of the things that worked for Tony, say, 30 years ago, wouldn't work for me today. The industry's changed. Media's changed. But at the same time, some things haven't changed. Just having credibility, having integrity. If something doesn't work, don't say it does. If something isn't good, don't say it's good. As simple as that is, those things never go out of style. But and looking back too, I remember some of the first shows that we did. I mean, I watch them now and I just cringe. Can't believe how bad some of them were, And over the time, we were always our own worst critics, and tried in our own way to always make it better each year. Whether it's myself, trying to become a better host, better videography, just better storytelling. There's always ways to improve, and that's something that we've always taken seriously. So.
Talk about some of your early successes, like just fishing, like when you were young and Devil's Lake was coming up. How many fish did you guys catch before guys wanted to come and film over here? I mean, talk about some of those first days when people started to realize Devil's Lake was on the map.
Well, it was crazy. I remember the Minnewacan Flats. At one time that was just a duck marsh in like what we call the Golden Highway. That was a blacktop paved road that, went from Grams Island to Minnewacan. And if you were to look out both sides of that road, all you'd see is pasture and cattails. And I remember when the water first came up and started flooding the Minnewacan Flats, and I just remember just so many trees in the water with their leaves on them still. And just driving through all these trees with leaves, green leaves, and it was like the Garden of Eden. I mean, it was just bizarre, and I remember just people were scared to death. And when you went through Z-Box Pass on the Minnewacan Flats, I mean, that's where a lot of the best fishing was, all that new water. And I remember people were just scared to death of it. People were talking about combines under the water, and I mean, if you were to sit in the bar long enough, people would even talk about a grain elevator. I mean, it was just, people were scared of all the things to hit, and there were things to hit. I mean, I remember seeing boats where the prop got wrapped up in a power line. That wrecks your day. Or even the barbed wire fence. If you get electric wire is even worse because, I mean, I'm not kidding you. I remember one time going through a slough that used to be a pasture, and 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. That's about how long it took. I had probably 30 feet of electrical fence wrapped up in my prop.
Oh, no.
And next thing I know, I'm in the water. It's probably like 50-degree water, and hanging off the back of the boat in the water up to my neck with side cutters trying to cut it off, And so, yeah, there's a lot of, that was probably what was so neat about it, was just all that new water and all the trees flooded, and it was just surreal. And obviously the fishing was incredible too, and Devil's Lake became known as one of the best fisheries in the nation. But I remember that those early years in the Minnewacan Flats with all those trees, I'll never forget that.
Yeah, there's probably some Polaroids out there somewhere of you guys holding up buckets full of nice fish, But,
oh yeah, that was back when you laid all the fish on a table and took a stringer shot, and that's how you kept busy, it was a Polaroid. You'd take a Polaroid picture and line up all the fish on the cleaning table, and then you'd hang it up in the bait shop, and your whole goal was every day to have a new Polaroid picture up on the wall, and people walk in, they'd see all those Polaroids, especially if they'd been out and had a tough day, and then pretty soon they'd be calling you. But yeah, it was just incredible. I mean, we were just a bunch of fishing bums.
Yeah, and I mean, and eventually those pictures and advertising yourselves, eventually camera crews showed up, and I mean, talk about some of your very first time you filmed with somebody.
Yeah, a lot of that was lined up with Devil's Lake Tourism. We had a really aggressive CBB and tourism department that really did a tremendous job of putting Devil's Lake on the map. And so I remember some of the first, I remember filming with Tony Dean, and this is kind of funny. So, Tony Dean had filmed quite a bit on Devil's Lake, and one person he liked to fish with a lot was Mike Schell, who I guided with, and Mike was just a tremendous guide. I mean, he was, I learned so much from Mike, not just about fishing, but just how to treat people and how to be a guide, and he was just the best of the best. And so Tony often liked to film and fish with Mike, and in the summertime. And one day Tony was coming up, and Mike had some repeat customers that he just couldn't hand off to me or anybody else. And so Tony ended up getting a short stick. Yeah, so I ended up going with Tony one day when he was supposed to go with Mike, because Mike couldn't, his customers weren't going to fish with anybody but him. And so I ended up going out with Tony that day, and I remember the day before, we just really caught the fish pulling deep cranks over in Minnewacan Flats over the old flooded cattail beds that used to be a thing back in the day. And so I was kind of feeling good that night, and you know how that is. And so we went out there the next morning, and the fish were just off. And I remember we had to work all day. I mean, it took us to like 4 or 5 o'clock to film an episode, and we ended up getting them on the Golden Highway. But so that was the first time I ever filmed with Tony. And looking back, I was probably only 23, 24 years old, I suppose, at the time. And but Tony and I, we just clicked instantly. We became really good friends. He became a mentor to me, somebody I could always get good advice from, when I was trying to navigate through this industry and figure things out. And then over time, we filmed a lot of stuff together. We filmed a lot of open water shows. We filmed ice fishing. We filmed waterfall hunting, and he just became a dear friend. But the first time was kind of an accident.
That's funny. Well, man, I think that's cool. I just want people to kind of get a taste of what, they can expect on this podcast. We'll do some deep dives into some of these stories, as the future goes on, because I just think they're super fun and entertaining and fun for people to hear and know, some of this history. But, for now, I just want to let everybody know that this podcast is going to be out there for everybody. Hopefully that they can really enjoy it and really learn from it and get to know a bunch of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And our goal right now is to release a new podcast every week. And so, we'll have it on our YouTube channel, and we might bring it up on some other platforms as well. But it's going to be fun. It's going to enable us to touch on a lot of things, and maybe remove a few layers that we just don't get to do on television.
Absolutely, man. Well, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to this episode of the JMO Podcast. We are so excited for the future of this platform, but it won't be a success without your input. So why don't you head on down to the comment section, let us know what you like, what you don't like. If there's anybody that you'd like to hear on a future episode of the JMO Podcast, let us know. We look at that stuff every day, and we appreciate your input so much. Once again, thanks so much for listening. Can't wait to bring you some more great content next week.